Hi, I'm James Williams and this is Chimes Media with the flags. Okay, so I'm kind of obviously as curious and bemused and bewildered as anyone is about the progress of the Brexit negotiations, Britain leaving the EU. And I'm somewhat critical of Prime Minister Theresa May's efforts in many fields. I'm very doubtful about her negotiating skills. I believe that she is quite authoritarian in many ways. She doesn't make very good decisions. I don't think she listens to her ministers very well. She doesn't seem to understand or doesn't seem to care about what's going on in South Africa, so makes inept remarks and even supportive remarks of impending atrocities that are underway there. I don't think she knows how to handle Trump at all. But she's in a good number there, but she doesn't listen to him either. You know, he's a top negotiator. Don't want to listen to him. So I'm very doubtful about her Chequers Brexit proposals, which are on the cards anyway to be rejected by the EU. And I think I find myself on the EU side on that one. But it's not clear about things. She's not I'm pessimistic. And meanwhile, she goes ahead with supporting closing down social media, freedom of speech. She's been in or around or involved in the persecution of the likes of Tommy Robinson and a few less prominent people. I just don't think she's up to the mark, and I'm question whether she's a proper Conservative, to be honest. Now, that's my little grumble to start with. I had some experience a few years ago of being a politician. And I did it for 4 years, but I was doing that job plus working at sea, plus running a radio programme, or trying to put forward a radio programme, a weekly one anyway. And that required organising interviews, mainly by telephone. But you still had to edit all the content and get it in, and I found out the hard way that my 1 hour was actually 52 minutes because they had to put news and adverts in there somewhere. And I also found my radio programmes were actually being censored because I can't say the wrong things. No, there's never any swear words in my radio programmes. That was one of the things. But because it was not to quite the sensibilities they like to hear, I was just about tolerated, but not always. Okay, so that put me off a bit. So I had a radio programme called Men's Matters, and it was very popular actually. It went very much online across the world. It was a broadcast thing, so once a week, usually a Tuesday evening, about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, pre-recorded because I was usually on board a ship at that stage. And it was quite popular. It gave me the sort of thought of maybe doing it, but independent to the radio station. The radio station were very good to give me the slot anyway. I'm not going to criticise them. They're very good. Express FM, if you're interested. And thanks very much for them doing it. But I would like to bring that back. At the moment, I've got this website, Chimes Media, which was my first ever created website. I do struggle with the terminology and what you can do and what you can't do, and I find I'm not alone in that. People who've been doing computers for years find that the changing focus and terminology baffles them as well. Anyway, I wanted to say something about my time as a politician. This is going back to I've been involved with all sorts of political parties. I ended up with the Conservative Party. That's in about 2005-06, and I was very impressed with the candidate Penny Mordaunt, who became subsequently the MP for Portsmouth North, and she's gone on to be a government minister. I liked her because, okay, she's a political type person, but she'd done other things. She was into, I think it was marketing and stuff like that. Anyway, I got surprisingly elected to Nelson Ward in Portsmouth by, I think it was 57 votes, or it was just scraped in sort of thing, but it gave me my shot of 4 years of it. I'd also tried to see what it was like to become an MP. So the Conservative Party, back in, this is before I became a councillor, ran a campaign to try to find potential parliamentary candidates, and I put in for it. It cost you some money as well. So I had to go up to the Midlands somewhere and go through this sort of test programme and that. And I didn't get it. And one of the things they said to me was, well, you answer questions too directly. And I thought, well, what's wrong with that? I've been working at sea in technical type jobs, if you like to call it. And if somebody asks you a question, you answer it, because people get hurt if you don't answer the question properly. And people, you can't fudge around and hide things in industry, because it's not only just inefficient and wastes people's time, it undermines the trust they have in you. And, things go wrong. You haven't got time for all that. You've got to be as direct and honest as you can. But apparently in politics, they don't like that sort of thing. You've got to sort of say mealy-mouthed things, and it has to be said in ambiguous terms. That really put me off. I mean, I was obviously suspected it was like that, but when you get somebody, an official in the Conservative Party, telling you that thing, that you're not suitable because, okay, that's not for me. But anyway, I went on to be a councillor. Now, there are 42 councillors in Portsmouth City Council. It's a unitary authority. It's not a big city. It's a modest city. But when I looked at the diversity of the council, I wasn't looking in terms of ethnicity diversity. I was looking at, well, who's actually worked for a living, who's got a family, that kind of thing. And out of the 42, I think there was about 5 of us who actually were in a job at the time. 5 out of 42. There were, I think, 3, maybe 4, I don't know, who were retired people, and you could say, okay, they've done a job. They've been working out there. But the rest were like ex-college students, or had been a social worker for 6 months, then gave it up, went to politics. This sort of thing. They hadn't really set themselves on a career path of any sort. And, it was, I thought, so well, that's kind of, how do they know what working people are going through? Okay, you can have some sort of empathy to understand what it's like to get the kids ready for school and that sort of, and that was another thing. I think it was only about 5 of us had families. I think most of the men in the council, not all of them, but in one particular party, I think probably all of the men in that party were actually gay. I've nothing against gay people, but gay people tend not to have families and that sort of thing, and they have different interests, don't they? Good luck to them. Some of them were good councillors. Not knocking them, but when you see the diverse range of representing the people, it was kind of lacking. It was kind of lacking in that respect. When you looked further afield, I looked in other towns and cities, and they had a similar sort of composition of councillor. But the pay you got was a rather basic pay. I think I got 10,000 quid or something. Well, it was 10,500. I think it was. There was 2,500 for being chair of a particular committee, and 7,500 at the time for being the actual councillor, right? Well, you could sit on your backside and do nothing, I suppose, if you wanted to, but I like to get involved. And it's very difficult because of being at sea. I mean, I was away for a week at a time, so I'd come home. I'd keep communications by emails, but I'd come home to a load of appointments and meetings and visits to people. And it was a heavy workload. And on top of that, in the evening time, I was preparing my radio programmes, for the following week. So I worked myself to death on that. It was kind of ridiculous. So I only did 4 years of it. That was enough to have a flavour of things. But it left me thinking, well, if you're going to pay peanuts, you're going to get monkeys. No disrespect, but I'm afraid if you paid a good salary for a politician, there would be a lot of competition for that political post, and you probably get a better calibre of politician from that. Now, most of the councillors that were there with me wanted to do good for the community. They genuinely thought that they were trying their best for the community. But some of them, of course, were very definitely in it for their own ends and doing it for purely political reasons. So I was kind of disappointed in many ways. I found myself, because some of the times, I actually liked what the other side had to say, and I would have liked to supported them. But you've got to vote along party lines and this sort of thing. And I thought that's awful, because that's not proper democracy, And they maybe question party politics. Party politics is divisive. It doesn't always get the best results. It's whoever's got the biggest number of votes wins, but it's not necessarily what all those individuals would have voted for. So it concerns me that way. And there's all this appeasement. Nobody stands on any principles because of the ambiguous nature of the talk and that. And I didn't like it. I don't feel I was a typical politician. So I only did it for 4 years, but and the radio program, because of my own work at sea, I had to start focusing more on that because it got kind of very busy on that job. Now, aside from that, you think, well, the two are not, or the three things are not mixed, but they are. I found as well, first of all, it definitely fatigued me, and secondly, there were people, even though my workplace was away from Portsmouth, there were people, I got the impression, I'm talking about management people, I can't prove anything, that resented my political interests. Now, I was involved in men's rights issues. It was more a case of dealing with the problems that men were facing. The high suicide rates, the losing out on custody arrangements, discrimination because you're male, therefore, we've got to focus on women more, that kind of stuff. A lot of that was going on, and I could see that, fatherless families were having a devastating effect on children, in particular boys. And I would involve myself on top of all those things and did a little bit afterwards on one-to-one issues. People would phone me up, not constituents, not voters of mine, with a problem. They'd found me on the radio, on the internet, on the radio programs, slots and stuff like that, and they'd make contacts with me, and I would do my best to help them. Some of it was very deep psychological stuff, but the whole thing was very fatiguing, very very tiring. So I'm now at this stage of forced into retirement because of sleep problems and things like that, which thankfully improved a bit. And I've got Chimes Media running. Chimes Media isn't advertised very well, apart from what I say here. And I'm looking to expand it. I want to set it up as a radio station type thing which goes on the internet, and to bring like the men's matters flavour of things back onto the scene. Now, I had a go at the politicians, and I also said about my trying to help one-to-one advice, one-to-one support for individuals in a bad way. And some of the people I did try to help had criminal records, and but I wasn't judging them on their criminal records. I treated them as individuals, as people, as men with problems, and very often their criminal records were because of their personal need that was not being addressed. I found them to be spiritually alone, isolated, even as children, frightened. It was kind of bad. There were tragic stories, There was a reason for why they went the way they did. But I also found as well, there were some people, very, very few, I didn't come across, the ones I was helping basically weren't this way. There were the sort of socio-psychopaths, which got me an interest in, hang on, there's a difference between a person who's got a few problems and done some bad things and a sociopath or a psychopath. So I started looking into that more, and I found that to be a very disturbing feature of humanity. So yeah, but in the men's rights movement, when with the work I was doing, I got associated with A Voice for Men and a few other groups and associates. But I was very much a one-man band, really. But I did find as well that amongst those that are supposedly advocates for men's rights, they wouldn't have anything to do with those who'd had criminal records. You know, these are the people, the men who, if they'd done something wrong, they had a sort of been done for, I don't know, assault or a robbery or something like that, and they found out about it. They wouldn't have anything. They wouldn't have anything to do with it. They just, oh no, we don't want to associate with you, that kind of thing. It was like almost, I think it was a self-preservation. If we're tainted by this, we'll get labelled the same as them. But I found it appalling that you can turn your back on the most hurt people in society. And it wasn't just men, because it was the fathers of those men, the grandmothers of those men, and that sort of thing. You can turn your back on the most hurt people in society because of your own, well, it's a sort of status thing. And so some of the associations I dropped off from. I dropped off with those. I would still associate with them. And there was one in he in his organisation, many of the people in his organisation were good people and very good intellectual arguments, things like that, very listenable. But he himself, I noticed, had occasional flare-ups with people who were in his association or associated with him. And okay, you have disputes, but he went into, well, I would say, a really hyper-aggressive stance against others. You know, not just simply F's and blinds, but threatening type stuff, you know, and very personally derogatory remarks, which was not becoming of someone who claims to be a CEO. And in one of these occasions, I actually stood up, it was on the internet really, and said, well, look, I gave sympathy towards the person on the receiving end. And, you know, that was it. I didn't say I opposed him, but because I'd given sympathy towards that, he turned his attention, his guns on me. And next thing I was being threatened and wished I was dead and all kinds of stuff. And I thought, wow, you know, this is somebody I'd been giving money for, supporting the cause. And he just turned on us like that. And I was kind of very shocked about that, you know. So there are those who pretend, I would say, or try, I don't know what you call it, to pretend to be supporters or claim to be supporters, but only if you're the right calibre, only if you're a nice person and done nothing wrong, you know, that kind of thing. They don't actually give genuine one-to-one support. So here I am, trying to save the world with Chimes Media. I don't know. If somebody wants to help out, that's great. You know, you can contact me by the website, whatever it is. I'm always grateful for help. And of course, like with everything, you need a bit of money to go on. So that's my little moan about things, about Chimes Media, about me, James Williams, what I stand for, the problems encountered. And I'll catch you again some other time. Take care of yourself.